Just to the audience, Lemya, she is educator, writer, and she teaches at the University of King Saud in Sharjah, UAE, and she is a member of the Sudanese Writers Union. She has enormous essays and articles in scholarly journals, newspaper, supplements, and online platform. She is also a translator from English and Arabic and vice versa. So we are very pleased that you could join us on Zoom, and we look forward to hear your contribution. So do go ahead, Lemya.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's indeed a great honor. Okay, I'll share my presentation right now. This is my contribution, which is on the character of Hosna bint Mahmoud and basically reclaiming Hosna's agency beyond the patriarchal reading. So this is actually the center of the paper. The critical problem is trying to challenge the dominant readings that portray Hosna's agency as being shaped by Mustafa Saeed, which risk reinforcing again the male dominated assumptions that center the male authority. And my analytical shift or the contribution I'm trying to share here is this paper is aiming to reposition Husna within a continuum of local female heritage back from the Kandakas through the Sudanese oral traditions and through the lens of local female heritage in particular. The key argument is that Husna resistance reflects an inherited, culturally embedded tradition of female agency rather than merely being a derivative response or a shade to Mustafa Saeed character. And the contribution I hope to share is that reclaiming female agency and proposes an alternative analytical framework that capitalized on the influence that have remained largely unexamined. So this paper is trying to make a shift significantly when Hosna is read through the lens of local female heritage, a continuum that extends from the areas of Kandaka to the rich corpus of Sudanese cultural expression, including folk tales, women's poetry, song traditions, and other historically marginalized form of female articulation, then a new interpretation is possible then. So the key terms here, mainly agency, patriarchal assumption, local female heritage, the oral memory, and the female resistance through time. And it goes like Husna's resistance emerges not as a byproduct of male influence, but as accumulation of an inherited and culturally embedded tradition of female agency, and we'll see that through times. The dominant critical readings focus on the Hosna bint Mahmoud is often read, as a reflection of Mustafa Saeed, her resistance, usually interpreted as a derivative of his influence, and that I believe is silencing Hosna twice within the text and again within the criticism. So it results in limited attention to her independent social and cultural formation. So why challenging those readings? Because such readings, as I earlier explained, they are reproducing the very male-centered interpretative frameworks that they seek to critique, and the female agency is subordinated to masculine authority, and the forms of female resistance that do not conform to male-centered narratives are all the time marginalized. So alternative cultural genealogies of resistance remain overlooked, and I'm trying to bring those to the fore. So reframing the argument, Hosna, to be reread through the local female heritage continuum, which includes, as I said, all these elements, starting from the kandakas through the folk tales, poetry, and even the songs, Aghani al-Banat, women's song in particular. So Husna's resistance is neither reactive nor derivative. It's grounded in a very long history and culture, and it represents local inherited traditions of female agency. And Husna is to be read through those lens of local female heritage. So alternatively, she appears as an inheritor of this deeply rooted, enduring legacy of female resistance in Sudan. Reframing Husna's agency is that Mustafa Saeed seems to be one contextual factor rather than the main or the origin of agency, and Husna's autonomy precedes his presence and exceeds his influence. And it's rooted in this long-standing practice of female negotiations and resistance. So the analytical contribution of this paper is to restore Husna's narrative autonomy and to shift the focus from male casualty to cultural memory and gendered knowledge systems. By this, we are reframing Husna as inheritor, as I said, of a deeply rooted and enduring legacy of Sudanese female resistance. By oral memory, I reflect on, again, the conventional readings that usually begins with Mustafa Saeed. So this study intentionally shifted the focus before his arrival. Husna's agency is understood as pre-existing and culturally grounded, and her trajectory is not reducible to external male influence. So through reading Season of Migration to the North, we all know that the early formation of agency, that Husna shows early signs of autonomy and defiance. Her childhood behavior was very exceptional. She used to fight with boys, to climb trees, to swim naked with them. So all these acts disrupt the normative construction of femininity known in that place, that time. And they all indicate an already formed disposition toward resistance. That's why I say that she precedes Mustafa Said and starts earlier before him. This continues through her adulthood, so developing to, again, a consistent kind of trajectory. It's not a sudden transformation that coincides with his arrival. So if we go back again, we'll see that it's already there. Her unconventional childhood, her acceptance to marry Mustafa Saeed, the foreigner who came to just appear in that village, and then her proposal after his death of Sham, married to the narrator. She was known to have very direct and assertive kind of speech. And again, her refusal of this forced marriage to what the race and the threat of her self-destruction. So all these acts through her childhood and adulthood, they signal that a coherent self-assertion, and she possesses this female resistance and negotiation strategies. So define the male privilege structures, and as I said, I'm trying to reposition the woman legacy and this very long cultural memory instead of the prevailing reading of Husna as reactive to Mustafa Said. So this is what she's standing against since her early childhood. Negotiation and resistance has always been there, maneuvering within male-dominating rigidity and It's always strategic, it's tactical, and we'll see examples for different type of this kind of resistance and negotiation. So it's like resistance to structural oppression and gender dehumanization. It signifies breakdown of negotiable resistance and signals final assertion of control over body and fate. And we can see it here like refusal, negotiation, containment, and then finally the rupture, her radical final act. So the contradictory recognition is we'll look at the subtle female acknowledgement, the shared experience of this subjugation, and then a latent sense of justice after her very radical act at the end. One of the responses of one of the wives of what the race were like, she felt that justice has been done through the act of Husna. Expanding the interpretive lens, so the marginalized cultural forms frequently excluded from literary criticism, though they offer critical insight into the formation of character agency and resistance. Husna character accordingly can be read as potentially shaped by the residual legacy of female sovereignty, in particularly in the region. I'll see examples from the same sociocultural environment Husna has been brought up in. So her imagination, an emerging sense of agency could have been nourished by enduring cultural traces. Oral memory is one of the elements. So it preserves the female experience, and resistance again functions as non-written cultural archive, and there's shapes the collective consciousness, individual subjectivity, and reveal how marginalized cultural forms, frequently excluded from literary criticism, can offer critical insight into the formation of character, agency, and resistance. So, rethinking her agency, it's not isolated, it's not derivative, it reflects inherited cultural logic of resistance, and her agency is historically and culturally legible accordingly. So we'll look through the lens of personal morality, historical consciousness and cultural memory. And actually, this cultural memory is always alive. We could see it in the Revolution of December, where all the strong women who are demonstrating the same characteristic that were very clear in Husna's character, they call them kandakas. Okay, so this memory is telling us that it's we're having a living cultural memory. Kandakas are just like Husna, symbols of leadership, resistance, collective agency. So it's like the historical female lineages going through time from the Kandakas time to our modern Kandakas. And with a stretch of imagination, we could imagine that Husna her character has been enriched with all these oral and historical factors. So Husna's character may be shaped by the residual legacies of female sovereignty, like the Kandakas, going back to the Kushite and Mediotic traditions. Again, we'll see examples of some women who are known for the same characteristics. So the agency is viewed within this long-term cultural continuum. The cultural environment and formation. So she's been brought up and situated within this historically rich and, as I said, also cultural landscape. So naturally, she is exposed to these enduring cultural traces in the very same environment she has been brought up in. So all this exists around her, and we can imagine that she's been nourished with all these elements. So I truly could imagine Hosna as a child, that she's immersed in shared cultural imagination, that she's surrounded by those stories of female power and resilience, and uh, those together function as, again, models of courage and symbols of authority and narratives of endurance. So the oral traditions, they like provide concrete examples of women whose action, just like Husna, challenge the patriarchal authority and structures a long time and through time. So cultural images internalize into consciousness, maybe was part of her dreams and reflection, and they shaped her enduring qualities, her strengths and agency. So once again, this agency is not merely reactive, and it's a reflection of this female autonomy, this historical empowerment. And as I said, I'm going to share some examples. The oral narratives in Sudan preserves models of female courage and autonomy. One of those women is Ahmed bint Mahmoud, and she is known for, again, eloquence and poetic expression, and she resisted um, something which is very close to Husna's resistance. Again, she said no to the society, and she said that through public poetic defiance, and it's up to now. This is like is resounding again and again, and it's used an example of this personal resistance. And through the character of Amna bint Abdul Majid, the term abate is closely associated with her defiant poetry. And abate simply means no. Abate is like it embodied resistance. So it's refusal, moral clarity, rejection again, and it is one of the examples that establishes a cultural model of female self-possession. So abate derived from the Arabic root aba, to refuse, in Sudanese context, and it signifies assertive refusal and moral steadfastness. Like in the poetry of Amne, it's like abate, and this again elongation is showing that her rejection is deliberate and is very strong. So Amna again is one of the Sudanese characters who has been brought in the north, the same area of Hosna bint Mahmoud. Another figure is Nasra bint Sheikh Idris. Again, she demonstrated strategic resistance. And we have Mahera bint Aboud. Mahera bint Aboud, again, she's using poetry for social and political resistance. And again, she's known for her personal strength and rhetorical eloquence. And she's giving us an example of another abate, another no, which is she used to mobilize anti-colonial struggle. So these are examples of very strong and sorry, yeah, and the particularly the three examples are from the north, as I said, from the same environment Hosna has been living in. So the oral memory preserves a lineage of female resistance, and through these narratives, you can see that there is a literary representation that legitimize the women's autonomy within cultural framework. So the relevance to Hosna is that, again, recentering the oral tradition as critical archives. Accordingly, Hosna can be read within this oral cultural continuum, and her defiance reflects those internalized models of resistance and cultural inherited agency. Folk tales is the other source. Again, Sudanese folk tales give us sides of female agency and creative negotiation. Women imaginatively, subvert the male domination or authority through them, and those narratives construct an alternative social reality for women where they, as mothers and grandmother, they pass it down through these oral traditions. And of course, they have moral and social instruction. And again, they give sort of collective storytelling practices that, as I said, give women a chance to resist the constraints of male dominance. So in those folk tales, usually the females, they exercise autonomy, resilience, and authority. Unlike the male figures who are often secondary or marginal, so the narrative is mainly female-centered, and it comes from a female-centered perspective. How women are depicted through these folk tales as agent of justice, architect of self-determination, and they reflect the aspirations for equality and control over their own lives and their own choices. So Hosna's assertiveness cannot be attributed solely to male influence. The folk tales are full of characters just like Amna and Mehera. So women are cultural authors in these folk tales. So Hosna assertiveness reflects this inherited imaginative tradition of kind of empowerment. The third element is what we call Aghani al-Banat, girls' songs, which is, again, it's another vehicle of agency. So they are like typically performed by women, and again, they are showing the same aspects of autonomy, resistance, and social commentary. I'll see an example for that. So it's again like the example you have mentioned earlier of Samira Dunya. It's like they look and then they express themselves through the lyrics and performance. So the cultural significance again is that historically marginalized informal cultural narratives, and there are subtle forms of resistance to the prevailing gender norms. Through this example, this is Insaf Madani. She's one of the performers. So Ma Daira is the same a bit. Again, it's no, very resounding no, the same no of Hosna bint Mahmoud. It's here in these songs. So you can see through this example, the gender expressive traditions through all these examples I've shared. Salih female depiction, always at the very core of the daily Sudanese life and very attentive to women's experience and suffering. And we could see that the female characters are cut differently. They expose limits of the representation in male author narratives, and they shift from a representation of female experiences and the way women words are perceived female characters in Tayeb Salih's work. They enjoy early cultivation of autonomy. They are ethically grounded and strong decision makers. They are diverse, culturally rooted resistance strategies. They use all this. So the female depiction is telling us that Saleh is representing them differently, and he's aware of all these cultural factors I've mentioned earlier. Women are represented as active agents of change. Female resistance emerges as structured, purposeful, and socially eligible, and Saleh's word builds women experience and realities, and accordingly reshaping their reception. Women agency, desires, interior lives is brought to the fore, and Husna exemplifies as transformative and culturally grounded agency. So Husna could be reasonably understood as being shaped by these sociocultural legacies. So integrating all oral and literary traditions into the critical analysis enriches the interpretation of the foregrounding local heritage. So Husna is situated within this continuous lineage of female autonomy. Finally, I believe that Tayeb Salih narrative vision appears to have been again shaped by strong female figures. His cultural upbringing appears to have been again influenced by female-fronted folk tales and songs, and he seemed attuned to such sensibilities about female agency, and he seems again to trace the presence of a female gaze across historical narratives. The same I've been trying to touch on the folk tales, songs, and other cultural expressions. Finally, I believe that this approach further resonates with the broader literary vision of Tayeb Salih, whose work engages with the local environment, particularly the Nile and its surrounding life world, while achieving this global resonance. So through this, Salih situates the small Nile side village within the wider literary and cultural imagination, rendering it both locally grounded and internationally legible. And as I said, through this paper, I aim to make this lens shift significantly when Husna is read through the lens of local female heritage that extend from the time of Kandakas up to our present time, through the rich corpus of Sudanese culture expression, including the folk tales, the women's poetry, the songs, and other historically marginalized forms of female expression. Thank you so much.
Thank you.